Something that I was actually expecting to see in LAIC. I wore my Meloetta pin thinking that it was just going to absolutely run over the field, and every single Mew that we saw was the 4 double turbo list. And I'm like, come on, can anybody try this and give it a shot? And it looks like the field today is a little more generous to me. We do see the Meloetta being run, and it's a great way to get very aggressive against these Lugias. You can get that turn 1 knockout with the Alyssa Sparkle, and that's something that they weren't always expecting.
Yeah, you definitely need that to make sure you can be keeping step in step with these Lugia decks, because the Lugia decks, yeah, there was a couple of times over at LASC that we saw that they didn't necessarily have the startup that they wanted, but then still being able to see the bounce back potential that they had with just how streamlined that engine is once it gets up and going is just insane. And if all of a sudden you're running just the turbo energy in this Mew, and you're not running that Meloetta, that you can all of a sudden be a turn behind, because that's also a deck that once it can get set back a turn, and then it really hurts.
Yeah, you don't want to be taking steps behind in the TCG. This can be very unfortunate. It looks like we are starting to make our way into round number 4. We have our players lined up. Let's go ahead and take it over to the stage.
Yeah, for our round 4 here, it's going to be Charlie Lockyer going up against Edwin Arrollo, and this should be a fun matchup. I mean, we've already talked about the Lugias. I mean, it's the Lugia, I'm Lugia. Sure, we've only been here for 2 rounds. I'm sure everyone is sick of hearing us talking about Lugia, but with it being such a prevailing deck, we will see it again. It'll be interesting to see just how it's countered in this matchup, because this could be a tricky one.
This is incredible to see Charlie once again on the stage here. We had him featured early in a regional that we recently had, and was playing this Vikavolt deck before it had some of these tools that we were looking for. It was really awkward to see it attacking with these Zapdos, helping just to give 10 extra damage and trying to get the job done. And now that deck has the Reggie Alecki to help out and get some damage rolling, he says, yeah, that's not fun anymore. I want to go even deeper into the tank. We are going to see an Inteleon box featuring some very cool attackers here in the Articuno and the Ice Cube.
And also featuring other things, not going to be too relevant in this matchup, but we can see Drapion as well. Just making sure that we are good for whatever is coming out here in the play. And there's a couple of different box-style decks that are out there. I mean, Lost Box, we just saw it. There's a couple different iterations of it. But Inteleon box, that will be fun.
Yeah, and you got to keep some jelly in that box. It's going to load up to have plenty of play here. The Articuno is going to be featured there, and that adds up to some very cool math.
Yeah, we talked about that paralysis in decks to go up against this Lugia, and that emergency jelly paired up with something like the Articuno is definitely a good way to make sure that you're not KOing yourself, because that paralysis comes at a heavy cost.
Yeah, it can be very difficult. If Charlie gets set up and lines up the math perfectly with the Articuno and the emergency jelly, then Edwin can be in a world of hurt. We're going to see what Edwin has for us there, as it is going to be a Lugia V-Star deck, but it's featuring some interesting inclusions.
I mean, these Lugia decks do have to adapt as well. Edwin, with the Lugia to start, is going to be able to go first and use that Evolution Incense to start trying to be able to pull some pieces. Very different Lugia list from the one that we just saw, though. I don't think we're going to get quite as crazy with some of these Texan Lugia as we got to see with that Mewtwo V Union. Instead, we'll see a couple of the more standard things that we've come to know paired up with a couple of different picks.
Great to see Edwin on that opening search, looking and identifying that Bird Keeper. That is going to be a pivotal card to avoid the lock here that Charlie is going to try to use with this Articuno.
And their Evolution Incense, so good to get the Archeops and just follow up Ultra Ball. Being able to Ultra Ball for the 2 Archeops is always a great feeling. That is maximum value there. You get to pick a Pokemon, get both of those birds in your discard as fast as possible. So nice. And that Ultra Ball just going to be used to retrieve this Snorlax.
Yeah, Snorlax can be incredible with that unfazed Fat, having an opportunity to just avoid the awkwardness of the paralysis here from the Articuno. So going to be targeting that early, and this has been such a fun inclusion in the Lugia decks. Been speaking with a few players out in the field, and it's slowly making its way into more and more builds.
It's easy to see why with that ability. I mean, the last thing you want is to find yourself on the wrong end of that paralysis, or even just a couple of these effects that they have going out there, like, okay, well, Amazing Evolve, I'm just going to KO your thing, and you are done for. Just having that Snorlax on the bench, though, we pass over to Charlie, and we're going to start with that level ball.
Yeah, Level Ball going to be searching out for the Sobble there. We know how important it is to get the ball rolling and get these Pokemon into the active spot. You have to have the Sobble there so you can use Keep Calling, get multiple Sobbles down. Eventually that opens up the avenue for those Drizziles to keep this deck in the mix.
You need a couple of energies onto the Articuno, so it's going to stay safe on the bench. And the fact that this is an Inteleon build, you want to make sure you have as many of those Sobbles down as possible, because that's going to be a great way to be searching and going through your deck.
We could also see the evolution line of the Sobble being featured in a matchup like this, just dealing more damage to a Pokemon like that Snorlax. Maybe you can get the Aqua Jet rolling and start taking knockouts that way.
Now that all the Sobbles are here for a party, back over to Edwin. Illusion, Incense. Good chance to go through the deck. Both of the Archeops are in the discard, but you can always grab that Lugia V-Star to make sure you have access to that Summoning Star to get started up and be able to throw them right onto your bench. The last thing you want to do is have a slow setup to let Charlie get this opportunity to get those energies onto the Articuno and start swinging first.
Yeah, I misspoke. It's the Aqua Bullet eventually that would get the job done here. But yeah, the Lugia V-Star, fantastic to find with the Evolution Incense. Double Archeops going to make its way down here. And that is the promo stamped one. Very nice to see that Archeops down, and that will lead to plenty energies. But I don't know if this hand has much else going on. This is maybe a little slow. Might need to see some prize cards from Edwin to help out.
A little bit of a debating. And it'll be the Aurora Energy. Going to ditch that Pumpkaboo and just attached onto the Snorlax on the bench before going for this Primal Turbo to be able to attach these energies straight from deck.
You can imagine if Edwin had a decent hand here, maybe we'd see a card like that Stoutland V being played in this spot. Would be able to get that down, use the powerful energies. Not sure if the reach is there for that just yet, or doesn't want to take a risk at being locked up in paralysis.
Yeah, those Stoutlands are so good against these one prize decks, and just the fact that if you can take that KO with that double dip Fangs, that you're able to grab a second prize card, a great way to make sure that you're going to get ahead in this prize trade, and that you are not finding yourself in a position where you just can't take enough of these one prize attackers. And that Sobble being the active, the fact that there is Pokemon with such low HP, it could be something potentially later on, but for now, just make sure no paralysis shenanigans and have the Snorlax come into the active.
Well, I do get worried when I see Snorlax early in a game like this. You have to wake up in spots like this, and we're not going to see this happen. You, of course, have to flip 2 coins to wake up from the thumping snore, and that is not happening right now. So going to be stuck in the active spot, looking for a way to switch out potentially, and that could be tough to find. This hand wasn't very strong.
Yeah, sure, you're taking the 1 KO onto the Sobble, but there's still 3 more on the bench. That's the fun of the Sobbles, and then the Drizzile going to be put down for the Evolution to get that Shady's dealing in. Charlie just going for a fast setup at this point.
This is strong because you have the Drizzile, of course, that you can fall back on in all of these opportunities. Just having the consistency that we haven't seen in a long time. This, of course, was an engine that was featured with the Arceus for so long, and that Irida is a great card to see back in the format once more. Getting the job done here, it can help search out these additional item cards to start getting this strategy lined up, and that's exactly where Charlie wants to be.
Yeah, you get a water Pokemon, you get an item card, and considering with these water Pokemon, you are in a great spot to be grabbing another Drizzile. That's what we're going to see really do here. So then you can just go for another Evolution, another Shady Dealings, just keep going on. This is such a great combination.
There was a lot of talk when we had this card first introduced of, do you Drizzile chain? Do you try to get to the Inteleon as early as possible? Or do you slow down here? And it looks like Charlie going to take a slower approach, value the Shady Dealings. And are you kidding? It looks like Snorlax is waking up here. That is not what Charlie wanted to see.
We've seen a lot of the Snorlax getting that double head rolls and being able to wake up. Those at home, it doesn't normally go down like that. This is a pretty lucky roll to make sure the Snorlax is awake and can start dealing some damage back in retaliation. Make sure this Articuno can get taken care of.
Edwin has the Bird Keeper in hand. When did that happen? It just off the top?
Hey, you need there's a lot of skill in the Pokemon TCG, but sometimes you need that little sprinkle of luck too to make sure that you are all set up. That's another prize taken now. The Snorlax back to being asleep.
Well, Snorlax is definitely doing their job, and This is unfortunate for Charlie. Gonna try to see if there's a way to accelerate this turn. Certainly could be lined up with a card like Raihan. Two of are featured in this list. So maybe we could see the Inteleon work that in, and we could see potentially a knockout, at least 120 damage, and maybe you work in a quick shooting sometime.
That's one of the nice things about having these one prize lists is a card like Greyhound just becomes so much more powerful because, sure, your Pokemon don't necessarily have the most HP, so being able to play that, get this quick energy on can be so strong. And that compares so nicely with the Inteleon that does need 2 to go for this Aqua Bullet and start dealing some bench damage as well.
This is what the deck is built to do. Just sacrifice these early prize cards, make use of these special fringe supporter cards that can benefit in spots like this, and you're really just looking to remove this awkward threat of the Snorlax. Once that happens, you can go back to the Articuno and try to lock in that typical strategy that Charlie has been using to get to 3-0 at this stage.
Yeah, you can't let that Snorlax just keep milling around doing its own thing. You want to make sure you can get that out of the way so you can do what your deck was designed to do. Now Capacious Bucket coming down on Charlie's end just to grab some water energies.
Yeah, Shady Dealings, so beneficial, being able to get those extra item cards, and I'd love to see at least one more Drizzile that could be a nod towards a quick shooting Inteleon. The math lines up so clean if you're able to just attack in for 120 and then take that Pokemon on your turn. Your opponent has to then promote into you, and maybe we could see more knockouts happen from this Inteleon later on.
Play that Capacious Bucket as well as a Rescue Carrier. I know from Charlie, quickly going to play down the Capacious Bucket and then go with the Rescue Carrier. Of course, being able to grab a Pokemon under 90 from discard, and that's going to be another solve right on bench. Followed up with the Drizzile. I mean, this style of engine with this Inteleon has been around for a bit, and it's for a reason. I mean, look at how fast it's just going through.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're at a regional championship if you're not saying Shady Dealings. And sure enough, it is going to find its way back on. And this is exactly what Charlie is looking to do in these spots. Just has these high hit point Pokemon, one prizers. He's consistently going through his deck every single turn, and it's going to start setting up potential knockouts. That Drizzile is a real threat on the bench, as it could be quick shooting. Wow.
Wow. The Snorlax, it's so close to being KO'd, but sticking around for another turn and understanding the situation is yet again going to roll that double heads to wake up in this position. I mean, that is... All right.
I thought that Radiant Jirachi was the only Pokemon that could flip double heads, but sure enough, Snorlax showing off here on stream, getting the job done, waking up multiple times in a row now, and once more is a threat with that thumping snore against the only real threat right now in this Inteleon.
Yeah, and it's putting in the distance for being that main threat too. That's for certain. Being able to essentially just close out a third prize and just hopefully do enough distance that you can maybe try and close things out after that. You do have to be careful though, because with Paralysis Loop, that would be a tough situation. Going to be able to use the boss's order, bring up that Articuno, and then just go for the KO.
Yeah, understanding that the threat here is the Articuno. Worried about that. Of course, the counts on the Articuno are a little bit scary. You see that, well, we see that there are 3 in the list, and it will be easily searched out, likely by way of a quick ball.
Yeah, but it's sure as soon as one goes down, another is going to come out to just make sure that there's going to be this pressure. Make sure that, yes, when I need this Articuno in play, I'm good to go, because telling everything else not going to do quite enough. But here it is, Radiant Alakazam. A couple of fun Radiant Pokemon making their way to the stage, and it will be this ability, Powerful Spoons, move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another, and that's going to take care of the Snorlax.
Yeah, of course. This is a great way to close out on Pokemon that are stuck in the paralysis loop. But, you know, you can just remove that Snorlax right there with the Painful Spoons, and that is something else. Edwin was not expecting that, and you can see that as he now decides who to promote into the active right now when Charlie hasn't even attacked yet.
That's so nice. You think that, all right, well, this turn's going to be used up to take care of the Snorlax. The math was good on my end. It had 10 HP left. We're in a really nice spot just to see this Radiant Alakazam come down. Oh, wow. And now Charlie can just keep going on. Inteleon onto the Drizzile to just go for that Shady Dealing to grab 2. I mean, Sure, maybe not the cleanest of starts with the fact that the Snorlax has done so much damage, but really, Dice still going on forward.
Yeah, we can see that Charlie even feels comfortable going for the next Shady Dealings, just getting even more resources available, eyeing up a card like that Raihan, understanding that eventually that this Inteleon will fall, and then if you have the opportunity to attack with that Articuno, that's how you get the ball rolling here. You get the emergency jelly, and things get scary.
Yeah, once you get that setup going, if there's not necessarily a way to break it, I mean, that could just be game on the spot. If all of a sudden these lists don't have a way to be able to counteract that, you could be put in a really tough situation. And sure enough, it's going to be that acceleration onto this Articuno to start getting ready to go.
Yeah, we see the wash energy as well on that Articuno, just making sure that nothing is going to get in the way of this interaction right here. Wants to continue to use Wild Freeze and not be removed from play by any awkward shenanigans. Just get rid of all of the additional effects that could come down from an opponent's Pokemon.
Yeah, after how long it's taken to get this engine up and going and having that Articuno, and you want to make sure that once it's promoted, that is done. That is it going on. Now, just looking on through, just to decide what to get with this other Drizzile.
Yeah, this is where you just want to go for some additional consistency, I feel like. Just make sure that your hand continues to have play. And looks like the Ordinary Rod is going to be featured. Maybe felt a little awkward with the fact that one of these Articunos, oh, actually 2 Articunos. Yeah, that definitely needs to be resolved right here.
Yeah, make sure that you have some attackers to be following up with. You have another Articuno in here. And for good measure, why not Palpat as well and get 2 of these Raihans back into your deck?
Yeah, I think the other Shady Dealings Inteleon is available in the hand, obviously, after the use of a scoop-up net. So going to have plenty of play on the following turn. See Boss's orders, too. So Charlie should be able to pick his spots in this situation and start locking in the freeze.
So then goes down to the moment, once there's the freeze, how do you counteract that?
You use your Bird Keeper at a perfect time, and you knock out this Articuno, and then you hope that your opponent cannot find another one. And I think that window is closing drastically, as we saw that Charlie was able to get multiple Articunos into the deck and is trying to have an opportunity to be able to chain those together. I think Edwin is going to have this turn to really at least take this knockout and hopefully not see the answers from Charlie's side.
There it is, the Articuno doing what it does best, is going to be able to go for that onto the Archeops and just a little bit of damage. And trying to set up, I mean, that is a way to start getting set up. It's that Stoutland V that we've talked about. You don't want that to be locked, but if this is the opportune moment,
you can see an avenue here. This is Edwin is sitting at 3 prize cards. He's trying to steal an additional one here. The Stoutland V is getting charged up with all of the powerful energies. Doing the math for not this Articuno, but maybe another Pokemon down the road. And I'm now curious if after this Articuno falls, will Charlie be able to continue a chain here and lock in this Stoutland, or is there going to be one more turn where Edwin could find a prize card?
So that's what it's going to come down to, is just that one more turn, because we have seen in the past that players are 1 prize away from taking the win and are unable to. So now being able to go for that Bird Keeper, swap the active with the bench, that is going to be 2 prizes thanks to the double dip fans from the Stoutland, allowing you to take another prize if it was knocked out from damage. So last in prizes is that Radiant Charizard. We'll have to see if Charlie can get a lock this turn or if Edwin will be able to follow up next.
Yeah, Edwin was so reliant on the switching effect of the Bird Keeper. He forgot to draw his cards with the Bird Keeper. Charlie had to point at the deck and say, hey, do you want those? Like, you kind of have to draw those if you want to keep playing the game. And sure enough, we see that resolved. And now Charlie, with the biggest turn of the match so far, Articuno with a Raihan is going to have to be the play. Of course, we saw the Inteleon with the energy down, so that will be able to retreat. Sure enough, Raihan ready to go, and an additional card can be searched out here. Have to think that the pieces will be lining up with the emergency jelly. Just curious if the rest of the hand is ready to go too.
Yeah, at least being able to have that Articuno, have the right hand, have the energy. You're so close to being able to piece this all together. And the fact that Edwin only plays a 1 of that Bird Keeper, you have a second chance of trying to put Edwin into this lock.
Of course, you do not have to reveal the card from that Raihan. You can just put that straight into the hand. But Why not? It's a really good card, Scoop Up Net. Let's go back in.
Hey, I mean, sometimes this is just how it's going to be going. Evolution with the Drizzile. Going to use that to grab the Irida, I believe?
Yeah, and that's just going to be to hold for next turn and make sure that Charlie will be able to draw into the cards like that Emergency Jelly. And that's such a strong play here. We see the Articuno now being promoted. That Wild Freeze going to start to slow down the Stoutland V and try to avoid prize cards for the rest of the match.
And that's such a tough blow, too. If Edwin can find some way out of it, if Charlie's unable to quite get the emergency jellies when needed to not be able to keep up this paralysis, I mean, maybe there's a way, but one prize away. One prize.
So close. We saw the use of the Snorlax was something that was very beneficial in this matchup, but maybe it was slightly misused. It was used before the paralysis was even coming into effect. So we saw the prize cards falling early. Maybe an early Stoutland and then following up with the Snorlax is a better way to go about this, as we see that the resources might not be here to close out a match.
Yeah, that way too, if you Stoutland to lead before the Articuno combo even goes up, you don't have to worry about the paralysis. And there wasn't really that threat of paralysis at that moment, right?
Yeah, this is definitely a live and learn situation here. But of course, I don't want to count Edwin out just yet. We don't see the pieces from Charlie, even though he is holding on to the Irida. And you still have to sequence everything perfectly.
Yeah, and if at any moment you're missing a piece, that could all fall apart so quickly. Considering there's the Drizzile and the two Snobbles, you know, there's kind of enough here that once you string things going along that maybe it should be fine, but we all know how sometimes that the TCG can be.
Yeah, you can have all of these openings here. We see that the Drizzile is down, the Sobble is ready to go, so as long as there's a way to evolve those, or if you have the supporter in hand to go get the right cards, you will have opportunities, but we've seen Marnie just completely shut down games, and Edwin has an opportunity, even if it's not this turn, eventually could find the right time to close the hand down for Charlie.
Yep, and just a pass, of course, as there's nothing that the Stoutland's able to do. The Birdkeeper's used up. There's not really much going on to send back over to Charlie to try and keep things going.
Yeah, we don't have freeze in the Pokemon TCG, but I guess this is the closest thing we're going to get to it. Paralysis feels pretty similar, I suppose, and freezing for a turn, I guess, is how this is going to be. But we're going to see that a lot of turns in a row here as Articuno is going to continue to get a little more help now by way of this Irida.
Yep, get a water Pokemon, perfect to grab a Drizzile or an Inteleon and an item card. Make sure that you can start stacking up the cards you need in your hand for the next coming turns to make sure you always have that emergency jelly on hand, since the Articuno does do damage to itself with that Wild Freeze and doesn't really have the most HP itself.
Oh, we do see the cards added in. Edwin seems unfazed as he's seeing the emergency jelly, and I feel like I would be a little bit terrified, even if I knew what was coming.
That's the moment your heart drops, like, oh, wait a second, this Articuno is not really going to go down, is it?
You didn't prize all three? Oh, no.
It one was prize, but, you know, you do a bit more than that. A little bit of shenanigans. I mean, that Radiant Alakazam that's in the list, I mean, that's so nice to be able to manipulate where everything is going. And now, emergency jelly being thrown on, and all the damage counters being thrown off.
Yep, that is so clean. Just does not have to worry anymore about the damage on the Articuno. And okay, Edwin is going to read the emergency jelly, and rightfully so.
Now here's the moment of, okay, how do I make sure that I'm good against this? And you were talking about the Marnie and to cross your fingers and kind of hope. Is there anything else really out of it?
It doesn't seem that way for now, at least. It's going to have to be an opening like that if the emergency jellies just continually chain in this instance. The one benefit is that once it's used, it's probably going to be, it's gone for the rest of the game, so you just have to make use of all of the emergency jelly at the right time, and maybe Charlie isn't able to chain those together, but bench spaces do open up by way of scoop-up nets. Maybe there's some opportunities there for Charlie to get another Articuno down.
There it is, just another pass. I feel like in this best of three, that's maybe how we're going to see the later part of this game go, as there is then this lock over on Edwin's side, and just yet again, Wild Freeze. You are not allowed to play the game for another game. Have fun.
I think Charlie was trying to move some damage with the Radiant Alakazam onto the Lugia, just moved 2 damage counters, and then Edwin adjusted for that. So maybe a little extra damage on that Lugia. We'll have to see if that's true. Maybe the judge can adjust that at some point. But regardless, the main key was to leave the Stoutland at least 20 damage short of the knockouts so that the Radiant Alakazam can take that on the following turn and the freeze can continue.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally then taking a KO that's not really going to get you the game, considering that Edwin only has to take one prize card.
Well, we're going to see if there's a way to slow this down. The boss's orders is also potentially beneficial, as the Radiant Alakazam now stuck in the active spot, and that's a double retreat cost.
Edwin definitely going for anything that he can here to just make sure to get this loop.
Okay, so there was the combination of the quick shooting also happened at the same time. So that's how that was resolved.
All right. Make sure everything's all good. When you have this many dice on the board, sometimes things get out of place, but we're all...
Sometimes you just need a point for the stream.
Exactly, right? For everyone at home, it makes things a lot nicer here. And that's going to be then, I believe the damage counter is being moved on to that Stoutland, going to be KO'd, and bringing this Lugia V-Star into the active. Yep,
and I don't think that Charlie is scared just yet. If there is a way to search through the deck, then we certainly could see a card like the air balloon found in this spot, and it looks like the Inteleon is going to use Shady Dealings to likely find just that.
Yeah, being able to just consistently involve these up, consistently have access to these trainer cards, make sure that you have a way out of any situation is so nice. We see the air balloon in deck as well, and quite a few options to kind of work around with.
We see the damage adding up here now. Charlie really just needs to take this knockout on the Lugia V-Star and close out on the Archeops, and the damage is piling. The quick shooting Inteleon is going to help even out the math, and you'd have to think that with the use of this emergency jelly this turn, that's at least 2 more wild freezes for Articuno. That's probably enough to close things out here in a couple turns.
Yep, that emergency jelly just being able to be stored on that Articuno is just so strong. Another card taken there just to make sure that the setup is going to be all good. Quick ball away through the deck. Pick up another Articuno just to make sure that things get weird. You still have one that you can rely on. You're not going to be all of a sudden out of emergency jellies and can't really attack with your active.
I think the only thing that worries me at this point is my opponent's boss's orders count a little higher than we've typically seen from other Lugia players. If that's an issue, then maybe you want to make sure you have these energies available, and we do see that training core coming down now. Charlie really thinking of everything in this stage.
Got to make sure, too, because you're so close to making sure that this is completely locked down that you don't want to accidentally miss a step here. Still in game 1, and just at the point at 25 minutes left. So this game is definitely been going on. Now that retreat out with the air balloon, so that Articuno can go yet again with this wild freeze to make sure this Lugia is paralyzed.
Yep, so this is starting to add up here. I don't know if the Aqua Bullet would be enough to close out in this spot, but certainly have to think that Charlie is eyeing something up with that. When you see the attachment already occur, you would have just held on to that if you were worried about a boss's orders retreat. So Charlie maybe looking to close out one turn earlier than we expected. Luminion V on the other side for Edwin. What supporter could be found here to help out? And it looks like that Marnie strategy is going to finally come down. Maybe can slow down this deck by the one turn he needs.
Just one turn, just one chance to just make sure that Edwin has an opportunity back into the game. Sure, there's quite a few different ways that Charlie can try and get back what he needs considering the setup that he has on his end, but you can always hope and you always have to be going for it in this spot.
Well, as of now, it's a little bit short of being a one-turn KO with the Aqua Bullet, I believe. I guess I don't want to speak until I have a calculator in front of me because this can get dangerous, but I think we've seen plenty of ways to manipulate the damage so far. It's basically just down to the quick shooting and the Radiant Alakazam helping out into manipulating the damage onto that Archeops and trying to take all 3 prize cards in one turn.
Yeah. Capacious Bucket used, but no energy left in deck to other ways to be able to try and get it. I mean, of course, with that training core, level ball used to grab that Manaphy. Just make sure you can clear out what you don't need from this deck.
Resources very thin at this point. Both players trying to just close out. Edwin needs one more opportunity. Paralysis has been such a pain right now, and Charlie understands exactly what's happening. Articuno likely going to get 2 more freezes in. And is there one more attack lined up? Maybe just one freeze and the Inteleon could get this done. We'll see where these quick shootings go.
One of the bench Archeops is the damage counter just gets higher and higher. You want to make sure that you can get that 3 when necessary. You can move, it seems like, all onto the other one before going for that wild freeze.
Yeah, all right, well, we can see it lining up here. We see the 110 damage onto the Archeops. Quick shooting in combination with the Aqua Bullet would be able to take the knockout on the bench if we did not see a card like the Manaphy come down. And Lugia has plenty of damage on it right now, so a 1-turn clock here for Edwin. Stuck in paralysis, has to feel so difficult in this stage. Just would love one more switching effect.
It's so frustrating too, because you've been so close to taking this for so long, but you just can't close it out. And of course, that's what a deck like Charlie's is aiming to do, is make sure that it's locked down, like they can't get that last prize. But when you're just 1 prize away, it hurts a little bit more than when it's the 3 or 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see Edwin. I was looking at his counts. The Serena is in the hand, which isn't exactly what you'd like to see. At least there are 2 bosses orders in the deck, so maybe one more opportunity to stall and try to buy some time, but this doesn't feel great, and I don't even think the resources are available to even find that card right now.
No, kind of just picking through the leftovers. We could be done in the moment, capture energy, inputted, but instantly just shuffling the deck. I mean, not going for anything else. And it will be that Serena being played just to get 5 fresh, just to see what could potentially be done.
Yep, Lost Vacuum is found off of this. If only the air balloon and a boss's orders in combination at the same time, maybe we could see something cool happen here, but this is starting to look like the last turn of game number 1.
Yeah, it's looked like it's been the beginning of the end here for a while, considering just how this has managed to been able to play out. And with the pass and it going back over to Charlie, this is where you can get the trip student and just quick. I mean, look how fast he's playing that. He's like, I got this win, just let me clean it up. I'm just like, I got this. And after a long game 1, we finally have our one person to at least get a win. Congratulations to Charlie, but we still have another game to play out. But whew, that was tough.
Yeah, that was. That's exactly what the deck is looking to do, though. You set up this game plan where slowly but surely your opponent will no longer get to play Pokemon with you, and if you do just that and do that consistently, you're going to find yourself in the winning column more times than not. 3-0 so far, and taking a huge win here, and especially when you're playing 50 minutes. And if you're able to take a 30-minute game 1, it's probably pretty difficult for your opponents to find 6 prize cards when they're on the clock like that. We're going to have less than 20 minutes to get game 2 done.
Yeah, at least on Edwin's side, Lugia can be a faster deck, so it will, as long as you can get that set up, get those Archeops, you can have a couple of those options. Just has to then rethink about how you're going to use those options to be able to try and close out a game 2, to at least bring it into a game 3. There is the Stoutland we saw, there is the Snorlax, but in what combination to put them down when?
Yeah, I think it's very important that Edwin finds the Stoutland first and goes for that. Gets aggressive and takes multiple prize cards. If you can take 4 early prizes against this deck and then start to see the Articuno, you can see a world where maybe you Bird Keeper into that Snorlax and your opponent just doesn't have the right cards to close out. You can take a quick game 2.
Yeah, because there's not very many options that Edwin has here. So that management is going to be more important there ever, to make sure that you have everything lined up when it needs to go, because we got to see just how close he was able to get in that first game with those 2 Pokemon, but you just have to utilize them in a little bit of a different way. Luckily, neither going to be prized here to start on Edwin's end. Yep,
not too bad. And also, you just have to note that these cards were not an auto-inclusion in the Lugia build, even as early as last week. And Edwin, with the understanding that these are cards that can definitely help out in matchups, Snorlax and that Bird Keeper, but you got to use them at the right time.
At this point, you're like, oh, I wish I had a second bird keeper. If I knew there was going to be so much paralysis out there. It'll be the Manaphy to start. Edwin going first here, and the Ultra Ball just to pitch 2 away and get this Lugia onto the bench.
Yeah, you'd like to throw away some Archeops in spots like these, but sometimes the hand is not going to be that helpful. And this looks like a little bit of a slower start where Edwin is going to need some help from his supporter next turn.
And the slower start is definitely not something that you want to see either, because something that's going to be going good for you is all of a sudden if you can get your deck up and going so fast to take these prizes that you still have your options available by the time that Charlie gets that lock and gets that paralysis. So if you can't all of a sudden get things going, that hurts.
Well, thankfully for Edwin, we do not see any of the powerful energies just yet. It is very important that you are able to get those with the Archeops or play them onto the Stoutland before any awkwardness like that Professor's Research is played. If you lose any of those, it can really mess with the math, and maybe you don't one-shot an Articuno.
Yep, and just energy on a board before Edwin passes over to Charlie to get things starting to set up. Irida is the supporter for turn. Definitely a way to get things rolling, get a water Pokemon. We got to see that Inteleon engine, just how strong it was the first time around, and not surprising that we're going to see the Sobble right in the front of the deck. And do account, make sure we're all settled, we're all good.
Charlie feels very comfortable in spots like these. Just, do I have a scoop up net? Do I have an energy? Can I attack with Sobble? Cool. If I can get a full bench, I'm going to eventually get my optimal strategy rolling. Capacious Bucket, Sobble ready to go with a Keep Calling. And this looks like an exact replica of game number 1.
And if it goes the same way as number one, I mean, Charlie in such a nice spot here. I don't think this game is going to close out on Charlie's end whatsoever, but winning the first game and being in this situation, even if we go to time, Charlie going to be taking a win here and just looking at fantastic. We're going to see all those Sobbles come down thanks to this Sobble attack, and that is a great first turn here.
Edwin is going to find that Lugia V-Star. And another way to get some cards into the discard pile. It's unfortunate just the order in which he's drawing these cards, but at least can eye out the Stoutland or the Snorlax right now. I'd really love to see the Stoutland get aggressive in this spot and take multiple prize cards, and Edwin's gonna have that internal debate right now, and looks like he's gonna switch things up this game.
And you were talking about in the first game how you would have liked to see this swap, and it could work out so well, especially since you're only going to need that one powerful energy, not the for however many you had last time, to be able to get this KO on the Sobble, as long as you're able to get an Archeops on the bench with this Lugia.
Yeah, and you can feel pretty comfortable playing more than just the one powerful energy down. They only really benefit the Stoutland. You're not worried about other Pokemon trying to reach for knockouts, maybe Archeops against an Inteleon at some point, but I think if that's happening, the game went very awry. So we're going to see at least the typical strategy of the Archeops from the Evolution Incense and try to find the discard pile. I'm scared if we're going to see 2. I think almost the whole hand has to disappear if we're going to see double Archeops.
But at what point do you just have to go for it, though? Because you're going to need a way to get this Manaphy out of the active. You're going to need to get this energy on the Stoutland to be able to take this Sobble for 2. I don't think you can really play too passive.
We're going to see the Crobat discard there, which would have been a way to add some additional resources to the hand and maybe not have to make too awkward of choices. The Lumineon is there in hand, but the retreat here is a little bit goofy. That means that the double turbo energy might have to be used on the Stoutland, and that can limit your damage output.
Though to be fair, actually, yeah, because then the math is so weird and tough situation with these different special energies and just how they have to line up, because needs to be important with the Stoutland that you're getting that additional, but then all of a sudden proactively going against that puts you in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why we're seeing the Snorlax added to the hand there. Of course, the main reason was just get the Archeops into the discard pile, use the Summoning Star, and have some options. But when these energies are charged up, you're picking one Pokemon to get these energies accelerated to, and one to retreat and a couple to attack. You maybe don't get your energies placed in the right spot.
That's the thing, sure. The 2 Archeops and just how much you get to throw on to your entire bench and your Pokemon that turn is insane, but sometimes it needs a little bit more than what you can account for. And the fact that we're going to be able to see that first energy attachment come down onto the Snorlax that was just benched, this is not going to be the Stoutland lead that you were looking for.
Yeah, of course, this opens up for, I guess, a slightly cleaner bench because you'd rather have a Snorlax down than a Crobat V. Crobat V is not going to be very helpful in this case, but I think if you just go with a very aggressive line with that Stoutland, maybe you do take the prize cards you need to close out in a reasonable spot. You're just asking for too many turns when you go with this slower approach, but we've seen how powerful this Snorlax is. At least going to start taking some knockouts here and start putting Charlie on a clock.
Get rid of the first Sobble at this point. Still going to stay asleep, but going to have a second chance. We did get to see really fortunate wake-up rolls in that first game, too, to allow to get the Snorlax to get that momentum needed. And that's a really quick way that this could also go wrong in the second game, because if you're asleep by the time things start up, well, then you're a turn behind in a game that you already lost.
That is a great point. We've been very fortunate to see the Snorlax continually attacking, and if you take one turn off, we've seen how important that is. It gives Charlie this huge window to find all of these cards, to get the emergency jelly and make full use of that on the Articuno. And we're gonna see the chip damage one more time from this Articuno. Just gonna Ice Wing and get that little bit of damage that's necessary to start to play with the math.
It's so much math in decks like these to make sure that everything is lining up. We got to see with it taking the 3 prizes right at the end for Charlie, just how each little piece of damage can be so important and crucial at this moment. Level ball being played, though. Great to go and grab yourself a Drizzile.
It's nice to continue the chain here. You need to get the Inteleon down. You need to draw into these resources and eventually have the opportunity to use Raihan and continue to have the Articunos ready to go. And right now we're not seeing it just yet, but thankfully plenty of Sobbles down and the opportunities will eventually reveal themselves.
You take down a Sobble, there's always another one in its spot to make sure it's nice and ready for that evolution for the Shady Alien to just keep going. These decks are so hard to deal with in that case, because as soon as you take that KO to get that momentum, well then there's another level ball. Here we go with another Drizzile, and it gets so frustrating on top of everything else frustrating about this Articuno.
Well, it looks like we saw Charlie even looking at the rare candy, and I was curious if that would potentially be a card that we see soon. That'd be cool to maybe get a very aggressive, quick shooting Inteleon down, and you can get plenty of damage accelerated. I feel like if you're in a situation where you lost game 1, that'd be really strong. You could start to increase the time clock here and get the job rolling, but I'm gonna maybe play a little slower. We'll see the Raihan at least, as there was a prize card taken last turn.
Yeah, great to get that energy attached to the bench Articuno here and just go and get a card to make sure that you're all good. Though I don't think Charlie in the spots really needs to play fast. If this just goes like the first game went, as long as Edwin can't get himself out of a bad spot, you still just win.
I think this just speaks to how strong a player Charlie is. He's going to make sure that this deck plays as best it can. And he's going to give us a full show here, which I respect that, of course. It's like we see a lot of players start to slow down their pace of play when they win that opening game, and they're just trying to survive. And Charlie is going to show exactly what this deck can do.
Yeah, make sure that we get to see in full display just why Lugia might not be the top dog this weekend, and one of the many ways that players like to try and counter it, because players going into this week kept talking about all the barrage of ways that could be used to counter the Lugia. I think some of them don't work, but it's apparent that this one is.
Well, one way that your deck can function very well is if your opponent just doesn't attack you, and Snorlax is stuck asleep, as it so often does in all sorts of fashions in Pokemon, and that means that Edwin is going to have an issue on his hands. Do you try to search for that Bird Keeper? Can you even find that at the right time? It's not like there's plenty of resources right now. There's 2 cards in the hand and a full bench.
That's such a bad spot to be in, because if your Bird Keeper is just used to let your Snorlax do something, well, then you're still falling victim to this paralyzed lock that this Articuno has, and that is your one main way to get out of it.
You see the amazing Destruction Evital added into well, as a 6th Pokemon onto the bench. That's a little illegal, but going to be added to the hand there, and I think this just speaks to where Edwin is right now. Gonna have to pass the turn over, no real plays available, and Snorlax going to try to wake up, and hey, just in time.
Just in time to be paralyzed.
Well,
let's go. Yeah.
Maybe not paralyzed, as Snorlax is going to try to avoid that with Unfazed Fat, but
Oh yes,
right.
right.
We'll see. We'll see maybe if Inteleon can work its way in at some point.
And see if Snorlax can just do enough damage here before it gets taken out with the damage that Charlie's able to do, because Snorlax, it did take 3 prizes last time around before it finally fell victim to just this damage that kept slowly building up over time. It just wasn't quite enough. Boss's orders, though, this is a Pokemon that can be paralyzed. It doesn't have that Unfazed Fat to keep it nice and protected.
There you go. Yeah, this is going to be perfect. This is a Pokemon with high hit points. You can manipulate the damage that's placed on it if you find that Radiant Alakazam at some point, and I expect to see some damage being placed here with that Quick Shooting onto the Manaphy. If you can remove that, then maybe that opens up avenues for where you can place even more damage later with the Aqua Bullet. So just remove that Pokemon from play if you can, and then you can start to keep chipping away at that Snorlax perhaps.
And then, yes, there is the Rootkeeper potential, but at the same time, that is then you've only taken 1 prize and you have to be using your out. And Emergency Jelly, I mean, Charlie just seems to have everything going right for him at this moment. Then Emergency Jelly on the Articuno to make sure that we're set. Energy onto the bench. You have that other Articuno basically ready to go, just 1 energy away. You have the Inteleon, and only 7 minutes left in the round for these two.
Well, we see the 4th Water Energy played down. That is the last basic Water Energy in the deck. There are only 6. Of course, we've seen the Wash Energy also featured in the list. And Charlie being extra conservative, wondering, where do I place this? Can I even afford to place this on a Pokemon that isn't Articuno at this point? And going to just play that where it needs to be. Have the 2 attackers lined up, and if something wild happens with a boss's orders, at least all of these Pokemon could make use of a scoop-up net.
Yeah, every Pokemon has some sort of use going on if something tricky happens. Quick Ball away a Pokemon just to go and grab a Lugia V from deck here for Edwin's side. At this point, though, with just that 1 Bird Keeper, where is this opportune moment to use it?
Well, it's slowly becoming a 1 in 30, a 1 in 29, a 1 in 28, and Edwin's going to continue to just draw cards until eventually one of them is something that helps here. I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen the Archeops start to take some energies out of the deck and try to help out. At this point, you have to do anything to help your odds here of drawing a Bird Keeper and maybe getting in the way of this loop.
That's the problem with only having those one-ofs. Sure, it's nice when you have it, and he was pretty fortunate to draw it when he could in that first game, but that's about where it ends up. Now that pass and it not being paralyzed the Stoutland anymore, back over to Charlie's end just for him to keep going with that setup to get it paralyzed for future turns.
Well, this would be the turn to have that Radiant Alakazam. You could place that down, move some of the damage counters off of the Stoutland V, and then, of course, move those back on to take a knockout when you so choose. Don't want to just be taking knockouts on these Pokemon and allowing attacks on the next turn.
Nope. That's definitely not the situation you want to be in for Charlie. Roseanne's backup is going to be making an appearance. You get a barrage of options here. There is quite a few things that you get to shuffle from your discard back into your deck. You get 1 or more, a Pokemon Tool, Steam Card, Energy. This is definitely a backup plan for sure.
Yep, break glass in case of emergency. Roseanne is going to do just that and say, we need more jelly. That's going to be a knockout here on the Manaphy. Perfect placement there to have a knockout lined up on the Stoutland V on the following turn too. And Charlie doing everything perfectly in this spot to almost lock up 4-0 here in Toronto.
Yeah, being able to get these KOs and being able to do so in a position where Edwin still has so much ground to make up. If he has any way to try and make into it, definitely has to feel good at this point. That's exactly what you're hoping for, because the last thing you want is something to go wrong and you only had, your opponent only had the 1 prize to be able to close things out. So
one thing I would have liked to see from Charlie maybe was not taking that knockout on the Manaphy just yet. Place that damage somewhere else, because this opens up a bench space, and this means that the Lumineon V could come down and find a supporter for Edwin, and that's what he's been dying to see lately is, can I just get a Bird Keeper and attack some of these Pokemon, because this is getting ridiculous.
Maybe feeling confident that even with a Bird Keeper can follow up and lock, but it doesn't. Oh, there is right at the beginning, so kind of easing out. There we go. Luminion V in hand will be able to go and grab that Bookkeeper.
We do see that pulled up to the front there, and this also it just doesn't line up perfectly. If you're taking a knockout here on the Articuno, it's already got damage on it. I suppose you're going to be getting a one-hit knockout on most of these Pokemon anyways, but you like to make your opponent have to use all of the emergency jelly to full effect, and it's not going to be happening this time around.
That little window of opportunity here for Edwin, instead of having to go for that 1 in 28, 1 in 27 chance to slowly draw through the deck, to be able to have that out to try and set something up here. We're going to see with that Primal Turbo a lot of powerful energy go into that active Stoutland.
Well, Edwin has a plan. He's going to get those energies down, have an opportunity to maybe take multiple prize cards here, and hope that Charlie doesn't have the answers, but you have to think at this point, Charlie's been setting this up for quite some time.
Yeah, even one thing going wrong, I mean, kind of seems to be in a position that could maybe try and get this back. You see that is just going to be the Stoutland going back into the active. Would have been a manual retreat with the energy on another Pokemon to make sure it can be a KO onto the Articuno with all of those powerful energy attached to be able to grab additional prize cards, so 2 in total thanks to the double dip fangs.
Well, with the damage placed on the Stoutland V right now, certainly you could see a knockout happening with the Radiant Alakazam or the quick shooting to close out on that Pokemon. But then the promotion happens, and if we see the Snorlax promoted in that spot, then that'd be pretty awkward.
And there it is. It'll be the Radiant Alakazam to make sure that this Stoutland is, you get your 1 attack and you're out, and the Snorlax going to be promoted here. Sure, it's not going to be paralyzed, but still taking damage is, that's the kind of the last leg that Edwin has to stand on here.
Well, I think Charlie's going to try to avoid that if he can. If there is a way to switch a different Pokemon into the active spot, you'd think that that would be the strategy. Palpad going to be the play here. Boss's orders eyed up immediately. And if there is one more additional deck search, potentially could see a different Pokemon in the active spot here, and that would be a disaster for Edwin.
Yeah, and time ticking away. Just 1 minute left between these two players, and still half the prizes to take on Edwin's end. It definitely hurts.
The cards just weren't lining up there in the opening of this game. Couldn't find the retreat on the Manaphy and get the Stoutland going early on. And honestly, Charlie had the answers with the Wild Freeze very early in this game. Going to see the boss's orders there on the Luminion V, and that's a couple more turns of paralysis.
Yup. And the fact that there is no Bird Keeper threat on the horizon is safe to bring up and make sure that, yep, this is going to get locked, this is going to be stuck here, and I can just go ahead and do what this deck does best and make sure that you can't play the game, and I'm the only one that's allowed to have any fun at this at all.
Edwin's last bit of fun might be at Marnie's party. Maybe could slow down the hand here for Charlie and avoid some resources, but he's going to get some bad news in about 6 seconds.
Yeah, and considering there's not really an out that's already been used, considering you still have 3 turns left, going to time here is just going to be a game that is just said and done, minus anything weird coming out from Charlie. But Charlie has done a fantastic job of piloting this deck and playing it all out, and would be amazed for anything weird to happen at this point.
Yeah, the speed at which Charlie was playing this match, he almost was able to win by prize cards. I think he's going to be just a little bit short, and both players understanding that that was a phenomenal performance there from Charlie, who's making a name for himself as one of the top control players here in from the United States, playing here now in Canada, doing a fantastic job, and maybe going to be mentioned with some other great names like Sander, as we've often shown here on the stream.
Out of all people, too, I'm glad it's Charlie that we're talking about with these control decks as well. Considering the last name, it just seems really appropriate, and just you always have to love how that ends up. But really, just with this deck and how it's been able to perform so far on today, that just smashed Lugia out of the park. That was perfect going up against this Lugia meta.
That's very demoralizing when you're playing Lugia and you're so used to just obliterating your opponent in 4 turns, and they make you tilt your Pokemon and cry for, what, 20, 30 minutes?
For the entire game, you just sit there like, oh, okay, I understand my fate. It is not great. You can maybe hope that there's not really too many of that in the field, because the last thing you want to do is go up against that again. That does not, I don't think that was a very fun 15 minutes ride one.
Yeah, I think a lot of the players were, if they were going to see a deck like this, it was going to be with Palkia. Palkia was trying to have this as an inclusion in their list to chip away at the Lugia and then attack with the Palkia and take